Good evening, everyone. May Jesus be with us and help us in understanding this important passage of the Gospel. As Miritis already mentioned, today I'll be talking about chapter 22 of the Gospel. And interestingly, this chapter is a very short chapter. So Bruno, in the beginning, he read about the divorce. Divorce, right? I think that's all.
No, divorce.
Divorce.
Oh, divorce.
Divorce, yeah. It's about divorce. So that means it's the following item. So I'm going to talk about the first one, but they're very correlated one with another. So that's why I used the initial reading just to give us some more context on what we will be discussing. Again, the title is The Indissolubility of Marriage. It means once you get married, you should not break that or separate, right, or divorce, which is something that it was introduced by the church in the 17th century ish, and that's why at the time of Kardec, this was the reality. So, for example, in Brazil, I think only in the 90s, in the that's when the divorce was instituted as something accepted. So it's always important for us to understand the state of things when this happened. Like we have two situations, right? First, when Jesus was having the dialogue, which I'm gonna read for you now, and later when Kardec came and he wrote the Spiritist doctrine. And it's always important to keep that in mind. And first, the divorce was something that was existed even at time of Jesus, right? Divorce. Divorce exists even at the time of Jesus, as we are going to read here and we're going to find out. So it was part of the laws of that time, and it's interesting to see how Jesus was questioned. So the chapter starts with this passage. So let's start with the passage so that we can reason about it. So it's a lecture, but I would call it more like a study session, because we're going to read and we're going to extract all the information that Jesus gave. So the passage is not that simple, but that even for me, I had to prepare okay, this is a lot of pieces that you have to put together, right? So let's start. The indissolubility of marriage. The Pharisees also came to him in order to test him, saying to him, again, the Pharisees, they came to test Jesus. Remember that at that time, Jesus was not still accepted as the prophet. He was always being challenged, right? And in different occasions this happened. Even like when they brought the woman that they want to stone, remember? It was another case that they want to put him in check, his teachings, right? So this was another situation. So they came in order to test him, and they asked him, is it permitted for a man to divorce his wife for whatever reason? So, and at that time there were laws. That's also important. So let's keep in mind, let's see what Jesus says. He responded to them, have you not read that he who created man at the beginning created them male and female, and that he said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh only. Hence they shall no longer be two, but one flesh only. Therefore let no man separate what God has joined. So Jesus, he makes a reference to the Old Testament, because when he says, have you not read that he who created, that means that was reading in the Old Testament, and it was part of the common knowledge at that time. So he referred to that passage that God created man and woman, right? And another interesting thing that he refers to the fact that the man should leave his father and mother. But at that time, what marriage was more about was like the man was still like connected to the family. Like even today, this sometimes happens, right? Like you have a marriage, but it can happen either with men or with the woman, right? So it's not specifically to the gender. But what he wanted to show here is that the two should create a new home and live their lives like independently, right? So they should unite and use that new family as an opportunity for them to grow spiritually, right? So that's what he said here. Leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh only. So it means like they should not be dependent on the other family. Of course, the relationship we will see it exists, right? So Jesus was not saying about that, but just think about so many interferences that couples have from family, right? Like even like I have my kids. I know that one day they will get married, and then I should like I can talk to them, but I cannot tell them what to do. That right now is the time that I should teach them how to be good and how to behave, and like even by my own examples, that's how I'm teaching them, right? So that's also very interesting to think about what Jesus said. But it continues. They said to him, but then why did Moses command that the husband give his wife a letter of separation and divorce her? Again, it was part of the Moses laws. They were again testing him, like, you know this Moses law? And that's what he says, that you should give a letter, right? And he responded to them, it was because of the hardness of your hearts that Moses permitted you to divorce your wives. But in the beginning, it was not like that. I also declare to you that he who divorces his wife, except in the case of adultery, and marries another, commits adultery. And that he who marries the wife that another divorced also commits adultery. So again, he's saying here that in the beginning, it was because of the hardness of your hearts. It's interesting that the way Jesus answered, because again, he was not contrary to the law, right? He said this was something that was needed. Again, let's put ourselves back when this dialogue happened, right? We know that a lot of the laws that Moses created, they were laws that were needed at that time. It was even like to control the way people acted, right? And in this case, the divorce, as I said, was something that was accepted at that time, right? It was not like the marriage was not considered to be indissoluble. Indissoluble? How do you say this? Like that you could not break the marriage, right? Like that's basically, they accepted that could happen. And then again, let's go back to their question. They say, Moses command that the husband give his wife a letter of separation and divorce her. Again, and in any type of relationship, like in case of like husband and wife, it's important to note that there are two spirits, like there's a responsibility from one to another, like in terms of what that can bring. And also, like when you get married, there is not only the two, but the families, and there is the community that knows that, right? So imagine that if you break that marriage, so you need to make that official. Like even today, like to the society, you need to declare that you're no longer married. So at that time, there was the ladder of separation. Today, it might be something different that you need to do, but it's similar, right? But it's a way to communicate. It's a way to communicate that this marriage no longer exists, right? And then Jesus said, okay, this only happens because of the hardness of your heart. And again, this law I mean, this letter of separation, it's similar to a law, right? So if they needed to give that letter, it means that was part of their laws at the time, right? And this is what? Is it divine law or is it a human law? It's a human law. And just for us to analyze, it's probably, back then, the letter could be different from today, right? Today, it might be, even today, from country to country is different. Like the procedure, it might be slightly different on what you need to do to accomplish it, right? It's a human law. It might be the case that in 50 years, it's going to be different from today. But it's a law, human law, and it's subject to what? To changing. But the divine law, on the contrary, is not subject to changes. And then that's also a very interesting point to analyze. So in this passage, Jesus was not contrary, but he, in the beginning of his answer, he said why it was needed. Again, we have to remember, we are in a planet that it has a certain level of evolution. The spirits that reincarnate here, they come with the plans to get married, and they have like trials and expiation, like they have like trials to go through in this life, and they may, and everybody has a free will. So that's another point that we need to consider. Like the marriage, it can be broken by any part. Like even if you are doing all your part, but your partner is not, and he's willing to take a different path. I mean, it's the free will. So one thing that to understand then is that the Spiritism is not like against the separation, like, or the marriage breaking, right? But it's we could also say it's not also in favor, because in the sense that, of course, in some situations it's better to separate than continue a relationship that will be more damaging. And in some cases, even like in the point that it can be like some physical like confrontation, or even like hurting the kids, right? So, but I say it's not favor in the sense that the Spiritism will try to show all the aspects of the marriage and try to resolve things, right? But again, this is only like a guidance, and even if the relationship comes to an end, it doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. So Spiritism, there's nothing right or wrong. It's more like it brings us a sense of responsibility and awareness of everything. So, but when we talk about marriage, we can think about like before the marriage, during the marriage, and in the case of the divorce, what happens after, right? So again, what we are talking here is more about like in the case where it could happen, right? Like, oh, is it correct or not? And what has the Spiritist doctrine say about it, right? And in the discussion, it starts by saying that there is nothing immutable except that what has come from God. And again, Kardec goes on the discussion saying that the human law is mutable, so it can be broken, right? So it's not contrary. But if the marriage was based on divine law, it all goes back. That's why I'm saying that it goes back to the beginning, right? Like when you intend to get married, what are you looking for? So let's think about today's marriage, right? Many people, like when they're like looking for someone to live with or to be with, what are they looking for? Again, we have to remember that each spirit has its own responsibility to know, to know ourselves, right? Like it's our job to try to understand us, to work on our imperfections, to be better. So marriage is only a situation where two are going to be working on those same goals together. But what happens in many cases is that people, they look for a marriage for other reasons, like social, or like just to status, right? Or just for financial situation, like to get a better financial situation, or like several other reasons, right? But not guided by love. Some, like in most cases too, like just by physical attraction, right? So it's like that's the only main purpose, and then sometimes even pride related to that, right? So again, we have to remember that pride and selfishness, they're very strong, and sometimes those are the principles that guide those relationships. And then if you think about the marriage happening after those goals, it was not based on divine laws, right? So those are human creations or human needs, and they try to do that, like to get married, and then later they will have trouble, right? Like in terms of relationship or being able to live together, to overcome all the difficulties. Because that's another misconception. People think, oh, I want to have a perfect marriage. And people think, what is your idea of a perfect marriage? Sometimes people that think that perfect marriage is a marriage where you never have any disagreement and everything's fine, everything's perfect, and that's not the reality. Even from the spirits, they know that even a perfect couple is not the one that doesn't have any disagreement. It's the one that knows how to overcome the difficulties. So it could be the case that sometimes there will be some disagreement, some discussion about something, but what is important is how the couple work together to resolve those things. So it can also be the case that the marriage is a marriage of trial, but not because the couple is fighting always, but they might have a trouble in their lives. They might be like a financial situation that is hard, and it's making their lives really hard. And then how they overcome that. And usually it's the case that the financial situation is what is going to cause the disagreement, or like fights, or like disrespect between them. So that's why it's important that the couple is like always focused on how to overcome this, and being together, like in terms of how to say, like, to overcome those periods of time, right? And when it comes to the children also, like when the kids, they have, sometimes it might be a son or a daughter that has a problem, or like some health issue. It can even be the case that one of the spouse, they have some very serious illness that they need to work together, or like to like do a lot of work together to kind of heal that. So we all know those cases, right? And then we have cases where both in cases that it works, and then where the relationship ends, right? So again, those are also cases of trials, and the important thing to know here is that how we act in those situations, right? So again, it goes how the Spiritist doctrine can help us, right? So that's also another aspect that we want to put here in our analysis, right? So the marriage, I have a marriage and I'm having trouble in my marriage. How do I go to overcome it, right? How do I go in terms of changing this and making my life better in terms of peace? Because all of we want is peace, right? And peace doesn't mean that you're not going to have conflicts, or like situations like with your own health, or with your children, or with other family members. Because sometimes it's also family members that cause trouble, right? And then if the couple is not united, those situations can be put them apart, right? But again, as I mentioned, there is, like, prior to marriage, what you're looking for when you look for someone, and then you get married. And then that's a different phase, right? Like, that's usually when it causes the difficulties, right? And sometimes it's basically like, I could say, everybody has some sort of personality, right? But the more you live together, the more you get to know the other, right? And that's also one thing that even the gospel says, like, that you should love your enemies, or like the more you live together, the more you will be able to somehow touch that person. That's why usually, like, when you know somebody is when you can affect that person either in a good way or in a bad way, because the more you know, the more you are capable of doing that, right? This also happens in friendship. It's not only marriage, but in marriage, that's what we're talking today, right? So in the marriage, because we live together, we have like a lot. Like, the more you live, the more you get to know, and the more you know how to act. And that's also important for us to be aware. Like, I can say something, but sometimes you say, okay, I'm not gonna say that because I know that it's gonna have consequences, it's gonna cause a fight, and then you just be quiet. That's one way of doing it. Or you can say it, and you know that the other person is going to be affected by that, and that's what you want. So again, it's the relationship is an opportunity for you to exercise or to purify yourself, because it depends on how you act. It's your free will to do either way, right? Yeah. And also, it's gonna be the case that you need to, like, that's why, what was the reason for that marriage? Was it because of love? And then it's always interesting because people say, oh, now that I got married, like, I have friends, or even I sometimes joke my friends that, so now I cannot play soccer anymore. Like, I lost my freedom to play soccer. This is wrong, right? Because if like, let's say, if it's my wife, so I think here in the US is very common, right? Like, the women here like to play soccer, right? If my wife likes to play soccer, I want her to go and play with her friends, right? Even if I go there, or if I like to play soccer, she can come with me. Or if she doesn't want to come with me, that's fine. Because sometimes even like the husband or the wife, they want the other to participate, and they kind of force that to happen. And that's the first, like, one of the pillars, right, of the marriage is respect. And we should always be respectful with the other. And it's like the wife comes and said, oh, let's go to my mom's house. And the husband said, I don't want to go. And then, no, but you have to go. And then if he doesn't want to go, and then he goes in that state, it's even worse, right? Yes. So if the relationship has respect, sometimes it's okay for you to have your own time, to be quiet, or but also, like, it's not an excuse for the husband or for the wife to never want to do that. I know that my wife's mother is important for her, and she wants me to be there, and I'll also make my effort to go, right? So it's on both sides that this should happen. And then this is part of the respect, right? That's why if there is love, if the marriage is governed by the divine law, the law of love, and that you want to be together with that person to build a family, to bring peace to your life, to progress, it's also the family relationship is very important. And if we put the Spiritist doctrine into the context, we know that those family members, sometimes just by interacting with them, it's important for us either to learn, because by interacting with other people, we learn from them, and we can influence them to be better. I mean, that's on the good sense, right? But it's gonna put us in shock, like, or in contrast with them, because you can be like in your brother-in-law house, and he does something wrong. How are you gonna react to that? And the way you react, it might be a way that is peaceful, and you're gonna teach, that situation will be used for something new to be learned, or it can be a situation that it can cause some conflict, right? And again, those situations, they will always come up, and then depends on how we act, which path we choose, we are going to be either strengthening our purification or our evolution, or complicating, right? So that's always important to keep in mind, right? And then, I mean, the respect is one thing that it's very important. And another thing that's really important, and sometimes it's very like, how do I say, like very, it can be cause of a lot of discussions, is like when, let's say, the husband has some achievement, or the wife, either one, like the wife has some achievement, and that was caused by something that the husband said, or some initiative that the husband contributed. What happens is that, I mean, either side, they want to take part of that. Oh, this only happened because of me. And then again, it's kind of trying to diminish the other. And those things, they should not happen, right? Because if you're helping someone, and that, like either husband or wife, and they achieve something, it means they made it, and then you have to be like thankful for the other for persevering, like in terms of doing it, and not try to like diminishing their accomplishment, right? So that's also something that happens quite often, and then we need to be very careful with not doing that, right? Because it can cause discussion and can cause like, and even like in the future, I can say, oh, I don't want your help, because later you're gonna say that you did, and then, I mean, that's the whole purpose of the marriage, right? To be together, as Jesus said, right? One flesh, in the meaning that two are together, like going through that situation, right? And that's another important aspect. Even though I tell like the other person, do this, or advising or supporting, I'm not taking their individuality. They are still individual. And in many cases, marriage don't go right because one of the, like either husband or wife, are trying to control the other. Like it removes all of their freedom. They cannot do anything. It's kind of a domination, right? And this is really wrong. And then that's why so many, like many marriages are kind of how do you say, a prison, right? Because the person is always like in control. Like it's you should not do that. You should do this, and then we need to be careful, because sometimes we can be in either side. We can be the one that are being controlled, or we can be the one that is trying to control. And it's important for us to analyze, like, is my action, am I controlling too much, or am I being too much controlling person? Or am I allowing, like I am doing something against my will and I'm not saying anything? Let's put one case that's very common. I want to go to the Spiritist Center today. Or like, let's say that both are from different religions, right? And one say, no, you should not go to that center or to the Spirit Center. So again, it's a lack of respect, right? Or if the husband or the wife comes to the Spirit Center and wants the other to come here as well, like forcing it to be here, right? It's like against the will. So that's another situation where you're trying to control. Of course, you have other ways to do that. You can influence or like talk about things that you learn here. It's a perfect way to bring the attention. Say, oh, that place seems interesting. That was an interesting discussion we had, and then that's the way you have to kind of awake the interest in the other person, right? But not forcing the other person to be here. And then in many cases, in a marriage, that's what happens. Like the other person loses their freedom. I joked about soccer, but I tell my wife that before I got married, I used to play soccer 4 times a week. And then when I got married, it got to 2, and then I got kids. First kid, it was 1, and then now it's no, but no soccer anymore, almost no soccer. But it's not because she didn't want me to play, but because the situation changed. It demanded me to dedicate my time in a different way, right? But I usually joke telling that she's the reason why I don't play soccer, but that's not true. But again, I mean, if I am selfish, I could continue on my 4 times a week, right? Even today. But that's, again, that depends on each one, right? So you go in a relationship, you know that you have responsibilities and you need to help each other, and the conditions, you need to act according to the situation. Of course, I didn't know that I had to stop soccer when I got married, but it happened. And also because the legs are not working properly. It is funny because
but that's not younger.
like the last time I got injured, it was before we traveled to Brazil. Like it was like a month and a half before going to Brazil. And then I had to go through a major surgery. It was like the Achilles. And then I had to go to Brazil on crutches. And then this, like last month, I saw that Neymar also got to Brazil on crutches. And then I said, see, that's what a soccer player's life is like. And then now we're planning to go to Brazil. And then I cannot play soccer this year. Like until June, no soccer anymore. So. But again, those are situations that happens. Like, and of course, I don't want to get injured because I know how much work it was for my wife the last time. And then it's not that she is demanding me not to play, but also like for myself. So, I mean, but that's the beauty of marriage, right? Like you're thinking about the other person, right? It's not only about yourself. And of course, I'm giving one example where I am thinking, but what are the cases where you're not doing that? And then you're creating like some conflict, and then you're kind of creating that condition in the marriage that it's like making things harder, right? So that's one thing that we all should analyze. And how many times, like in when things are not going well, and there is always like who is right or who is wrong, like that. I mean, we have to be fair. Like that's what happens, right? The discussion is always like who is right or wrong, and sometimes just by saying, okay, sorry, even if the other person might have their part, because usually it's the case that both have their own part, right? But how do you break that? Is by being humble, right? Okay, let's stop this, and that's if we do that, we always like putting love above everything, and that's what Jesus mentioned, and also the chapter mentions that whenever we unite based on divine laws, it means we are looking for a marriage where we are going to grow together, like we are going to be together, we're going to have accomplished together, right? Like and even when you're looking for someone, I already talked about like in the beginning, right? Usually it's the case that you're looking for someone that is going to complement you. Even unconsciously, that's what happens. That's why sometimes you have like a couple where the husband is kind of quiet, and then the wife is the one that talks more. And then that's because like there is like a complement on them, like because together they kind of, imagine that if both of them were quiet, it will be like very stressful, right? And then maybe it will be something difficult to go along. But that's usually what happens, right? Then, I mean, this is also an important aspect about the freedom. Like when we get married, it's important to know that everyone has its own individuality. And sometimes, like either the husband or the wife, they want to have their time. And it's okay to have that their time, like, and this is sometimes cause of the discussion. Why you want to be alone? Is it because of me? What did I do? Tell me. And if you engage into that conversation, you're gonna make things even worse and worse. When the right thing to do is, okay, you want your time, it's okay. Sometimes the husband or the wife, she wants to go out with her friends. Okay, let's make that happen. What should we do? And knowing that that's important, right? Because like you need to have your time, you need to have like a different like just by interacting with your friends, that's so like helpful, like so healthy. for both, right? It's not only like the wife, but the husband too. But that doesn't mean that you're going to do that every day, right? So there are two extremes. But it's important. That's why it's important to have the equilibrium, like both know like when and what to do, and also depends a lot on the situation, like financial situation. Maybe it's something that you can do, you're capable of doing. Let's do it. Like, why not? And then, oh, not this time. Let's wait. And this is all things that the dialogue. I mean, that's another thing that is very important in a marriage, right? Is talk, because sometimes the person is being oppressed in not doing things and never say so. And then it keeps like quiet, and doing like letting the other control. And then when it starts to say something, it will be like an explosion, right? So it's important to say, oh, and also always in a good way, like just explain the other, because sometimes the other person is not aware of that. It's just a question that you let the other person know, and then say why you like to do the things you want to do, and if you can make that happen. And sometimes it's, for example, if the wife likes to eat something good, like some food, even if the husband doesn't know how to cook, it's very easy today to cook something, right? Because you can go to the internet and you can search for the recipe, and you can watch a channel in television. Like even if you get at home at midnight, there are some channels that are showing like how to cook. So it's the little effort to do something that will please the other. I mean, again, it's either husband or wife. It's not, both can do that, right? And that's what will keep the relationship stronger and stronger. Because this usually happens only in the beginning, right? Those things. And then after you get married, those things kind of fade away. And we should not let that to happen, right? And always be like, oh, I know that she likes to eat, let's say, pudding, like, or some other food that she likes. Why not make an effort to be good at making those, right? Even if you don't succeed, but you try and you do your best. And those are the things that we should always keep in mind. Again, the passage talks about the indissolubility of marriage. Again, the Spiritism is not against it. It will, as Emmanuel suggests us, is that the divorce should be the last resort. Like you should try your best before you get into that point. And it's usually the case that it's something that it can be reverted. Like if you have humbleness, if you have charity, if you're looking for, if you love, I mean, if love is in place, you will find the solution. And in the cases where it's harmful, it can be something that it's going to cause some major trouble. The divorce is something that should be done, and we should follow the laws. And depending where we live, we should go after and informing people, and also like informing people that the marriage came to an end. Because today, it's even the case that people only after years or months or after that people will realize, which is also wrong, because it gives some sort of breach for people to say things that they should not be saying in the first place, right? Like, and then that's also, as I said, there is family and there is community that know about that marriage, and they need to be informed. Again, it's a topic that we could talk more and more, but it's already time. And so I think the Spiritist doctrine gives us a lot of resources. And also, like, if we are in a situation where we are having difficulties in the marriage, there are a lot of things that we can do. So here we have the fraternal assistant, the fraternal talk, that we can come talk. There is the gospel at home that you can make, and you can invite the family members, talk, and never like trying to condemn the other, but just analyzing those texts in the context of what is it trying to tell us. And then the context of the family relationship will always come together, like, and will make us reflect on that and give us more awareness when those situations come into our daily lives. So those are a lot of resources. We can come, we can read, we can always read something good every day, like a small passage that Joanna de Angelis always says, like, read a small passage every day. It will keep you alert and trying to do the right thing and to be humble. So there are a lot of resources that the Spiritist doctrine give us, and as I said, there are a lot of things that we can do to revert the things, and of course, by studying and talking, dialogue, those are powerful resources that we all can do. So may Jesus be with us.